week where I bookmark stuff for about 7 days. Like I researched this blog for the whole week, and everything's really exciting and good. But first we're looking, I'm pretty tired.
It's likely that the first time we get an extent of ice that's less than 1 million square kilometres, it'll stay that way for a couple of weeks towards the end of September before building back up again when the colder months start to encroach. But the heat that will have got into the water while that ice was missing will make it extremely likely that once we've had a blue ocean event, we'll continue to get them every year thereafter.
So remember that even though I'm going through my bookmark folder and lots of cool things are being discussed, this is also the year we'll probably get a blue ocean event. Gotta remember.
SpaceX has pulled it again by launching Arabsat 6A, a 6-ton satellite, into geostationary orbit. This is very first commercial launch of SpaceX Falcon Heavy, something SpaceX has been working on for many years. Massive success. The Falcon Heavy, the world's most powerful rocket currently in service, successfully launched Arabsat 6A satellite, but more importantly, successfully landed all 3 Falcon Heavy cores without any hitch. SpaceX has demonstrated capability, a masterclass in how to execute a very complex and highly demanding rocket launch and retrieval of all 3 cores, something no one has ever done in history of space flight. An historic first.
It's important to note that where they put that satellite was geostationary orbit. Like the thing I'm talking about in my book, Geostatica. I think that people have cottages up there. I think it's a whole new world where people can have cottages in the space and on the ocean.
Long before humanity colonizes Mars, our children will live in floating nations on the sea. Calcium carbonate will be harvested directly from seawater, creating seashell cities grown organically using 3D printed biorock. The aquatic generation will live in upside-down skyscrapers, sea scrapers, where tremendous weight will hang deep below the sea, securing such stability that neighborhoods will be raised on pillars high above the waves.
There's some people down in Thailand who are living in natural waters. It's not Thailand, it's out in the ocean, and they're making, she said, very real. I don't know where to go, but it might go forward into some pretty exciting places.
So our subject today is rotating habitats, and the first thing to understand about rotating habitats is that there's a huge zone of options, all linked together by only one common denominator: centrifugal force. If you're in a place that has no gravity, and you want some gravity, the only 2 ways we currently have to do that is either to pile a ton of mass together for its natural gravity, or to fake it with spin gravity, essentially to use centrifugal force to mimic gravity. Odds are if you're watching this video, you already know what centrifugal force is. We all encounter this force on a regular basis. You've probably heard it referred to as a fictional force as well, or more accurately as one which does not exist in an inertial reference frame. But for all purposes, it's real enough. It's real enough because it lets us hold objects down against the surface like there was gravity, even though there isn't. And so long as the vessel you're spinning is decently sized, basically bigger than a football field, the mimicry of gravity holds for most biological purposes. So we can take a big ring, or cylinder, or torus, or anything else with radial symmetry like a sphere, and spin it around and the sides become a floor you can walk around on. You can even jump up and down and land where you're supposed to, as the fake gravity keeps working even when your feet leave the floor. You won't quite fall straight down due to Coriolis effect, but for any normal human leap on any decently sized rotating habitat, you'd never be able to tell you missed your mark without highly precise equipment.
The thing that CSAT said, rotating habitats have common is that they're huge in space, like CSAT 70% of the pond is ocean, and space, well, it goes on forever. Pretty well infinite space. And the only way that we're going to preserve animals is people get out of here for a while.
Can we live long enough to see the singularity? For those who haven't already heard, there's this idea floating around that the exponential progress of technology will reach a point where humanity as we know it can no longer continue. In other words, a future period where humans will have merged with machines and gained immortality in the process. So, if you yourself are looking for immortality, then all you'd have to do is survive for long enough until this happens. Because at this point, the rate of emerging technologies in genetics, cybernetics, and nanotech will come to give the appearance of a vertical curve, what futurists call a spike, or singularity. Singularity is essentially a term borrowed from the black hole event horizon, where it's impossible to ever see what's on the other side of the curve. The same applies for the curve of emerging technologies, which are being developed at such accelerating rates that we can no longer predict what kind of society it will lead to. Perhaps they'll lead to superintelligence, space exploration, or as transhumanists have suggested, eternal life. People who support this are commonly called life extensionists. American founding father Benjamin Franklin was one of the first to suggest that at some point, all diseases, including aging, will inevitably be cured by science. This isn't an exaggeration. In the past year, business accelerators like Y Combinator have been financing the first so-called longevity startups in Silicon Valley. Tech giants like Google and Apple creating anti-aging subdivisions have also become a thing. In fact, the richest man in the world, Jeff Bezos, has partnered with the Mayo Clinic to do human studies on reversing aging, while billionaire Peter Thiel has now donated $7 million to the SENS Foundation. Currently, the average human life expectancy is increasing at a rate of about 5 hours per day. And once medical technology becomes good enough to give us 24 hours per day, then we will have effectively reached immortality. Now, your instinctive reaction to this is probably to respond with the argument that living forever would be boring. But I'd challenge that notion, because new experiences are being invented faster than we can consume them. So would it even be possible for you to get bored? When we look at examples of people in real life, they don't actually seem to run out of things to do. Maybe because we live in an infinite universe with infinite possibilities, and boredom is just a state of mind. I've never really understood this whole boredom argument, because if they assert that infinite life would be boring, then why are they ignoring the obvious fact that eternal death would be even more boring? Even then, the great thing about longevity is that if you ever get bored, you could always just kill yourself at any time. You don't have to live forever if you don't want to. Life extensionists tend to be fine with euthanasia, but emphasize the ethical imperative that we must also have reverse euthanasia, where people who don't want to die are actually given the choice not to. Some people in their 30s often say that they don't want to live past 90, but when they turn 90, many still want to live to 91. Death anxiety is really just part of human nature. People who say they plan on killing themselves before they get too old do an awful lot of talking, but no walking. which is why we need this option of life extension in case you change your mind. Deny it all you want, but anthropologists have pointed out that the desire for immortality is central to all human cultures. It's no accident that virtually all religions offer some account of an afterlife, because the human desire for self-overcoming is as ancient as humanity itself. Burial ceremonies and preserved fragments from religious writings show that prehistoric humans also were deeply disturbed by death. In fact, the oldest piece of writing in history, the Epic of Gilgamesh, tells the story of a king who devotes his entire life to seeking immortality, because he believes life would not be worth living otherwise. Upon learning that there exists a herb at the bottom of the sea which could grant one eternal life, he ventures out on a quest battling fearsome monsters to find it. Fast forward to the modern day, and nothing has changed. Even still, we are all Gilgamesh. Aging itself, categorically speaking, is technically a form of genetic affliction that we inherited from an outdated evolutionary mechanism. In the words of gerontologist Dr. Aubrey de Grey, aging is just another disease that can and should be cured. The only reason aging isn't being classified as a disease is simply because it happens to everybody. But that's not really a scientific reason to have this classification. There have been rallying cries from all over the scientific community to launch a quote-unquote Manhattan Project to cure aging, so that we can save as many people as possible. After all, people will look back in 100 years and wonder why we didn't work harder on anti-aging research, just as we look back 100 years ago and wonder why they didn't work harder on antibiotics and vaccines, which could have saved billions of lives had they been developed a few decades earlier. We don't know when this technological spike will occur, but computer scientist Ray Kurzweil estimates that it might very well be in the middle of this century. 2045 to be exact.